Once upon a time, in a cozy little forest, lived 3 bears: Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and Baby Bear. Their house, a charming wooden cottage nestled between the trees, was warm and inviting. Every morning they would sit down together to enjoy their porridge. It was a peaceful life. One sunny afternoon, a curious girl named Goldilocks wandered through the forest. She had long, flowing golden hair and a mischievous sparkle in her eyes. Goldilocks wasn't like most children. She didn't dream of riches or a life of luxury. No, Goldilocks had a very unusual dream. She longed to be swallowed by a bear. Goldilocks had always been fascinated by bears. She admired their strength, their size, and most of all, their bellies. She believed that being inside a bear's stomach would be the ultimate adventure, a place where she could feel safe, secure, and hidden away from the world. So, as she wandered deeper into the forest that afternoon, she found herself drawn to the bear's cottage. Feeling bold, Goldilocks knocked on the door. No one was home, so she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The cottage was cozy and smelled like sweet cinnamon porridge. Her stomach growled loudly. "Perfect," Goldilocks whispered, smiling to herself. "This is the place." She wandered over to the table where 3 bowls of porridge sat, cooling in the stillness of the cottage. Without hesitation, Goldilocks began to taste each one. The first bowl from Papa Bear was too hot, she burned her tongue. The second, Mama Bear's, was too cold. Her teeth chattered as she took a bite. But the third bowl, Baby Bear's, was just right. She ate it all, spooning the porridge into her mouth greedily until the bowl was empty. "Well, that's better," Goldilocks said with a satisfied sigh, wiping her mouth on her sleeve. She looked around the room, her eyes landing on the 3 beds. They looked inviting. Goldilocks had always been curious about the bears' beds too. What would it feel like to sleep in a bear's den? With a grin, she climbed into Baby Bear's bed, pulled the covers over herself, and closed her eyes. Before she knew it, she was fast asleep. The door creaked open, and the 3 bears returned to their cottage after a peaceful walk in the woods. Papa Bear was the first to notice something was amiss. As he approached the door, he grumbled. "I smell something strange," he muttered, sniffing the air. Mama Bear tilted her head, puzzled. "What do you mean, Papa?" "I don't know," he replied, a frown crossing his large face. "Something's off." He reached for the door handle and slowly pushed the door open. The bears stepped inside, immediately noticing the chaos. "Someone's been eating my porridge," Papa Bear roared, glaring at the empty bowl. "Someone's been eating my porridge," Mama Bear exclaimed, her face turning red with surprise. "Someone's been eating my porridge, and it's all gone," Baby Bear wailed, looking at his empty bowl. As the bears inspected the room, they noticed more oddities. The chairs were clearly moved in a way that suggested someone had been here for a while. The cushions on the sofa had been rearranged, and the pillows on the bed were lopsided, as though someone had been lying down. But most perplexing of all was the sight they found in Baby Bear's bed. There, nestled beneath the blanket, was a small figure. Goldilocks, fast asleep, her golden hair spilling out from under the covers. She had snuggled in so comfortably, her small body curled up under the soft sheets. For a moment, the bears simply stood there, staring at her. No one spoke. What is this?" Baby Bear asked, blinking in surprise as he poked his head around the corner of the bed. "That, my dear, is a girl," Mama Bear said. "But why is she in our bed? And what did she do with all our porridge?" Goldilocks woke from her nap. She yawned and stretched, blinking up at the 3 bears. Hello," she said casually, as if it were the most normal thing in the world to be sleeping in a bear's bed. "I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Goldilocks, and I have a confession to make." The bears looked at each other, puzzled. "I ate all your porridge," Goldilocks continued, "and I might have also, slept in your beds. But there's a reason for that. You see, I've always dreamed of being swallowed by a bear. I want to experience life inside your bellies." The three bears stared at her, momentarily speechless. Finally, Papa Bear cleared his throat. "Swallowed by a bear," he grumbled. "Why in the forest would you want to do that?" Goldilocks smiled dreamily. "It's always been my dream, to be cozy inside your stomachs. I've read stories about bears and how their bellies are like little worlds of comfort. I want to know what it feels like. And I think it's the perfect place for me." The bears exchanged uncertain glances, unsure of what to do. But before they could speak, Goldilocks stood up, her eyes shining with excitement. "Please," she begged. "Let me try. I promise I'll be respectful. I just want to know what it feels like to be inside you." The bears were still unsure, but a sense of curiosity overcame them. They had never met a human like Goldilocks, and though they were cautious, they decided to indulge her strange request. Goldilocks stood up from Baby Bear's bed, eyes sparkling with anticipation. Papa Bear, the largest and most imposing of the three, stood quietly, his massive form blocking a portion of the light that filtered in through the cottage's windows. His fur was thick and wild, a deep brown that looked almost black in the dim light, and his eyes, usually filled with a deep wisdom, now shimmered with something closer to curiosity. "Well then," Papa Bear said, his voice a deep rumble, "I suppose I'm first. But don't expect this to be easy. I got a big bear belly. You better be sure this is what you want." Goldilocks nodded enthusiastically. "Oh, I'm sure. I've always wanted to know what it's like inside a bear's stomach, and I think yours is just the right place for me. I've heard that a big, strong bear like you must have the coziest belly. Please, Papa Bear, let me see if it's just right." With a grunt of agreement, Papa Bear made room for Goldilocks to approach. She could feel her heart racing with excitement. This was it. This was the moment she'd been dreaming about. The bears, though skeptical, had given their permission. They were curious now. And though it might seem strange, Goldilocks knew her destiny was tied to the inside of a bear's belly. Papa Bear sat down, his massive bulk shifting the floorboards as he lowered himself gently onto the ground. He spread his enormous paws in front of him, the fur on his belly parting like curtains. Goldilocks took a step closer, her excitement bubbling over, but she couldn't help feeling a little nervous now that she was about to make the leap. "This is really happening," she whispered to herself. "Go ahead," Papa Bear said, his voice rumbling softly. "You wanted to try, now's your chance." Goldilocks nodded, took a deep breath, and without hesitation, climbed into Papa Bear's open mouth. The interior of Papa Bear's mouth was warm, slick with the faintest trace of honey and berries, the remnants of his afternoon snack, no doubt. She could feel the softness of his massive tongue as it gently pushed her further into his throat. Goldilocks, though a little disoriented, felt an unexpected thrill as she slid deeper into the depths of Papa Bear's body. The tunnel of his throat seemed endless, but it was a welcoming warmth that surrounded her. The further she descended, the tighter the space became, until she could feel his muscles, powerful and strong, squeezing her gently but firmly as she slid down into his chest. Goldilocks let out a little giggle. "Wow," she said, amazed at the sensation of being wrapped in such a deep, rhythmic warmth. "This feels like a cozy cave." But as she descended deeper into Papa Bear's belly, she started to notice a strange discomfort. At first, it was barely noticeable, a slight pressure against her chest, a tightness in her ribs. The further down she went, the more pronounced the sensation became. It was like being in a room that was too crowded, but the walls kept pressing in no matter how much she adjusted her position. The temperature began to change too. While the warmth had been comforting at first, it was now a little too hot, like stepping into an overbaked oven. Goldilocks moved uncomfortably, feeling her skin prickling with sweat. The stomach walls, though soft, were beginning to feel more like rubber, expanding and contracting with the movement of Papa Bear's deep breaths. Papa Bear," she called, her voice muffled by the walls of his belly, but loud enough for him to hear. Came Papa Bear's low, growling response from above. The sound of his voice rumbled through her entire body, adding to the odd sensation of being inside him. "This is really warm," Goldilocks admitted, shifting her legs to find a more comfortable position. "Maybe just a little too warm." Papa Bear chuckled. "Well, I am a big bear. We tend to run a little hot. It's not easy being this powerful, you know." Goldilocks tried to relax, but the heat kept pressing in on her, the walls of his stomach pushing her around. The churning sounds inside his belly, gurgling, sloshing, bubbling, grew louder and louder. The air inside Papa Bear's stomach felt thick, heavy, and oppressive. It was starting to feel less cozy and more suffocating. The walls of his belly were beginning to feel too tight and squeezing her into discomfort. Goldilocks frowned, her stomach turning a little. The stomach felt too active, constantly moving, with waves of discomfort rolling over her. It wasn't the peaceful refuge she'd imagined. "This isn't quite it," Goldilocks whispered to herself, feeling the walls of Papa Bear's stomach shifting and sloshing around her, a bit too uncomfortably. Everything was too tight, too cramped. "Papa Bear, I think I need to come out," she said, her voice tinged with panic. "It's a little too tight. Too much. I don't feel quite safe. Feels like I can't move. And there's heat everywhere." Papa Bear, sensing her discomfort, gently shifted his body. "Well, it's not a place for everyone, I suppose," he said, his voice softening. Goldilocks sighed in relief as the pressure around her began to ease. The walls of his stomach rippled as Papa Bear started to stand up, and slowly, she felt herself being pushed back up his throat and out of his mouth. She blinked in the light, gasping as she tumbled out of his mouth and back onto the soft forest floor. That was a bit much," she admitted, looking up at Papa Bear, who was still sitting in front of her smiling. "You were brave," he said with a chuckle. "But it seems my belly's not quite what you're looking for." Goldilocks nodded. "It was warm, yes, but it was way too tight. I couldn't move, and the heat. It wasn't what I thought it would be." Goldilocks smiled, brushing herself off and standing up. "Well, thank you for letting me try. I think I'm ready to try Mama Bear's stomach." Goldilocks turned toward Mama Bear. "Maybe yours will be more comfortable," she said. "Very well, if you think you're ready. I'll let you try my belly," Mama Bear said with a gentle smile. "But I must warn you, my tummy's a little different from Papa Bear's. I'm not as big and burly, but I can promise you it's just as warm." Goldilocks nodded eagerly. "I'm sure it'll be perfect. This is going to be the one." Mama Bear lay down on her side, curling up slightly so that her rounded belly was exposed. Her fur was thick and soft, and her stomach, though not as enormous as Papa Bear's, was still quite large, gently rising and falling. As Goldilocks approached Mama Bear, she could smell a faint scent of fresh pine and earth, mixed with a hint of sweet honey, much gentler and more comforting than the overwhelming scent of berries and half-digested porridge in Papa Bear's belly. "This feels much more relaxing already," Goldilocks murmured to herself. Goldilocks knelt down and placed a hand on Mama Bear's stomach. Mama Bear opened her mouth. "Whenever you're ready, dear." Goldilocks took a deep breath and crawled toward Mama Bear's belly, slipping gently into her open mouth. The inside of Mama Bear's mouth was much softer than Papa Bear's. The texture of her tongue was a velvety surface that held Goldilocks as she slid down further. Unlike Papa Bear's mouth, which had felt slick and sticky, Mama Bear's mouth was clean and slightly sweet, with a faint taste of honey lingering on her lips. As Goldilocks moved down into Mama Bear's throat, she noticed the difference immediately. Where Papa Bear's throat had been tight and forceful, Mama Bear's was a gentle slide, easing her further into the bear's body with minimal effort. Goldilocks smiled. "This is better," she thought, sinking deeper into Mama Bear's body. It wasn't quite the suffocating heat of Papa Bear's stomach. This was more like being inside a cozy den. The air inside Mama Bear's stomach was cool and breathable. As she slid lower into Mama Bear's chest, Goldilocks began to hear the first gentle rumbles of Mama Bear's stomach. The sounds were a far cry from the active churning she'd experienced with Papa Bear. Here, the rumbling was slow, a reassuring sound, as if Mama Bear's belly was just settling in for a nap. "Ah, this feels nice," Goldilocks whispered. But as she sank deeper, she couldn't help but notice that something wasn't quite right. The deeper she descended, the more Goldilocks began to feel a little too cold. Mama Bear's stomach felt a little too barren. She could feel slight heat emanating from the stomach's inner walls, but it wasn't the heat she had been expecting. It was a little too intense and chilling. Mama Bear's stomach lining was tough and unmoving. There was no soft give, no room to settle in and find the right position. "This is nice," Goldilocks said, but her voice had a slight edge to it now, a hint of unease creeping into her tone. "But it's not quite right. It's a bit too cold and too tough." The rumbling in Mama Bear's stomach grew louder. "Mama Bear," Goldilocks called softly, her voice now tinged with uncertainty. "I'm not comfortable here. It's cold and I can't move much. Your belly feels a little too tight and unforgiving, and I can't stretch my legs." Mama Bear's voice came from above, soft and soothing. "I'm sorry to hear that, dear. It seems that my tummy isn't the right fit for you after all." And so, with one deep breath, Goldilocks was pulled back out from Mama Bear's stomach. She tumbled out of her mouth, landing softly on the forest floor, brushing herself off and looking up at the last bear standing. Finally, it was time for Baby Bear. Goldilocks waited for a moment before grinning widely. She had a feeling this would be just right. Goldilocks stood before Baby Bear, who had been quietly observing the entire process. He was the smallest of the three bears, but that didn't make him any less special in Goldilocks' eyes. In fact, he had been the one she felt an odd sense of connection to, almost like he was the bear who might finally offer her the kind of experience she had been longing for. She could feel it in her bones. This was the one. Baby Bear's small frame, covered in soft golden-brown fur, was nothing like his father's massive size or his mother's curvy nurturing shape. But Goldilocks had learned something very important over the course of her bear journey. Size wasn't everything. What mattered was the feeling of comfort, of the right environment, with the right amount of warmth. Not too overwhelming, not too cramped, not too hot or too cold, but just right. And Baby Bear, with his wide, innocent eyes, seemed like the perfect choice. "Well," Baby Bear said in his small, squeaky voice, "it looks like you didn't quite fit in with Papa Bear or Mama Bear. But maybe my tummy will be just right for you." Goldilocks smiled brightly. She had a feeling this would be the one to make her feel complete. With a deep, excited breath, Goldilocks made her way toward Baby Bear's mouth. As she neared, she could feel the warmth radiating from him, gentle and not too hot, comforting without being overpowering. Baby Bear's mouth opened, and instead of the slickness she had felt in Papa Bear's, there was something soft and supple about the interior. The walls of his mouth were warm but not sticky. The scent of fresh air mixed with the sweetness of berries and honey filled her nostrils. It was a clean, light fragrance, calming and just right for her senses. "I'm ready," Goldilocks whispered to herself as she stepped carefully inside, feeling the soft muscles of Baby Bear's mouth gently guiding her toward his throat. His tongue was smooth and not too firm, and she could feel the comforting sensation of sliding down with no resistance. Baby Bear's throat was a delicate journey compared to the other two. Where Papa Bear's had been hot and forceful, and Mama Bear's had been snug but constricting, Baby Bear's was just the right size. Smooth, soft, and accommodating. Goldilocks could feel every movement. The walls of his stomach began to embrace her. Not too tight, not too loose, like the softest cushion she had ever felt. There was an ease here that she hadn't encountered in the other bears. She didn't have to try. It was as if his stomach guided her into the perfect position inside of him. She slipped deeper into Baby Bear's belly, her body sinking comfortably into the soft space. Unlike Papa Bear's belly, which had been hot enough to feel like a fire, and unlike Mama Bear's, which had been cold and too compact, Baby Bear's belly was perfect. The air was warm but not suffocating. The space was expansive but gentle enough to feel secure. The walls of his stomach were soft and pliable, unlike Mama Bear's stomach walls. Goldilocks couldn't help but let out a soft sigh of relief as she stretched out her limbs. "Ah, this is it," she whispered. "This is the one." It was everything she had imagined it would be. She could feel the gentle vibrations as Baby Bear moved, like being rocked to sleep. The gentle press of his stomach walls was a perfect fit. She could feel the slight bubbling of his digestion process, the occasional gentle gurgle, a soft shift in the air as his stomach processed the food he had eaten. But it wasn't harsh or uncomfortable. It was all part of the soothing lullaby-like rhythm she had found herself in. As Goldilocks closed her eyes, drifting deeper into a sense of comfort, the environment inside Baby Bear's belly began to feel even more perfect. She felt lighter, as if she were floating in a peaceful space where nothing could touch her. But as she nestled deeper into this safe, peaceful space, the quiet comfort of Baby Bear's belly was suddenly interrupted by the faintest rumble, a small growl of hunger, barely noticeable at first. Baby Bear's stomach had started to rumble, the soft gurgling growing louder and more pronounced. She had not thought about it before. The gentle growls and soft burbles of digestion reminded her that Baby Bear had skipped his porridge earlier that day. But soon, Baby Bear started to feel a strange rumble in his stomach. I'm kind of hungry," he said, rubbing his belly. Before she knew it, Goldilocks felt more forceful motions of digestion. Slowly, Goldilocks began to feel her body becoming compressed from all sides. The walls of Baby Bear's stomach, though still soft and warm, were now shifting in a way that felt more intense. The rhythm was no longer gentle. It was purposeful, and something about it made Goldilocks realize what was happening. Baby Bear's hunger had grown, and now his stomach was beginning to digest her, slowly and without malice. "Oh no, I think he's really hungry," Goldilocks exclaimed, realizing that she wasn't just meant to be a guest in Baby Bear's belly. She was meant to be food. The pressure of digestion increased as she realized she wasn't just in Baby Bear's belly for comfort anymore. She was part of the process. Her clothes, still intact, began to feel tighter as the digestive process began in earnest. The warmth around her now felt different. It burned. The stomach acids began to do their work, and Goldilocks, now starting to feel the effects of digestion, realized that she was slowly being broken down. The last thing Goldilocks heard before everything went quiet was the faintest little pop from somewhere deeper within Baby Bear. Then it was all silent again. Goldilocks, now part of Baby Bear's digestive process, felt the last of her clothing and form disintegrating. The sensation of being digested was strange. She melted away in Baby Bear's stomach acid, and became slush in Baby Bear's stomach. Some time passed, and then Baby Bear let out a huge fart. The remnants of Goldilocks's clothes, now fully digested, flew out of him with a burst of air. The forest around them smelled faintly of berries and digested human flesh. And that was the end of Goldilocks. She had become part of Baby Bear, and in the end she was turned to poop. The three bears continued their lives, content in the knowledge that they had given Goldilocks the adventure of her dreams, even if it was not exactly what she had imagined. And so, the tale of Goldilocks and the three bears came to an end, leaving behind only the faint scent of fecal matter that was Goldilocks.